Good.
Right.
Morning, everyone. We're here with Desiree Cluff, also known as Rockababy. Desiree is the best sleep consultant in the Lower Mainland. And,
thank you.
Which is great. We refer back and forth on a regular basis, and the clients that we see, the infants that are having sleep challenges, we see incredible results when they're working with us, and especially when they're working with Desiree, so we refer back and forth on a consistent basis. Desiree has been working with kids for 18 years. You got a degree in neuroscience.
Yeah.
In the last 8 years, specializing in sleep habits of babies and toddlers. And really focused on attach-based parenting and hands-on parenting that when parents are present as well. And so, which is why we, her philosophies and our philosophies really work well for how kids should be sleeping. So we're going to talk a little bit about that.
Sounds
Welcome.
good. Thank you.
Awesome.
Thanks for having me.
Anything else you want to add that I missed in there?
No, I mean, I just think it's really important for people to know that, there's alternatives to your traditional sleep training, right? So we'll get into that, I'm sure.
Okay. Well, let's talk about we see a lot of people here that are infants, and we see a lot of sleep challenges that are occurring.
Yeah.
What is the ideal that you're telling parents for newborns, infants, that for how much sleep they should have in a 24-hour period?
I mean, I think it really differs. At first, when baby first comes home, you're not really on any kind of schedule, right? So it's really on demand. You're just like feeding, sleeping, hopefully, as long as baby doesn't have things like colic, reflux, and so on. And in that case, you see a lot of that, and I refer a lot of that to you because I know how much it's helpful to see you to kind of overcome that stuff. But I would say that you want to be looking at somewhere between, like on the high end, it's going to be about 16 hours of total sleep time in a 24-hour cycle. So we want to be looking at somewhere between 10 to 12 hours in the night. And I know that sounds like a lot. A lot of people think, oh, my baby slept through the night and it was only 7 or 8 hours. That's not enough sleep. They need at least 10. So if I have clients who are, on the low end of that and are only having, 9.5 or 10, we really want to work towards more than 10. And then we want to be having at least somewhere between 2 and 4 hours of daytime sleep, depending on the age of the baby.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we talk about the same. 16 is like that bare minimum.
Yeah.
18 is well slept. Mm-hmm. And that's really when we're looking at neurophysiology as well. It's 18 hours is the ideal situation for newborns. And it seems like it's crazy because really that's, when we're looking at it, it's a sleep cycle.
Yep.
They wake up, diaper change, feed, diaper change, 20 minutes of play,
yep,
and back to sleep.
Yep, definitely. Newborns, it almost looks like they wake up, they feed, they they pee or poop, and then they're kind of back down again. Especially in the morning, I find that people get really confused about morning because the morning is always the shortest cycle of wake time for a baby. So it's like, oh, it looks like they're tired again. Well, they are, and they can get overtired if you miss that window, and then you're in trouble.
For new moms and dads, what are some of the big, I don't want to call them mistakes,
right?
But what are the big challenges you see? What are the things that some parents are missing, whether they be cues for sleep,
yep,
or the wrong timing, or the wrong amount, or the wrong method? What are some of the big ones that you see consistently that you see infants getting into bad habits?
Right. I think a lot of the time what I see is overtired babies. And that means that, again, like what I was just saying, that wake window from, first waking up in the morning to your first nap is usually very short. So you need to be conscientious of your wake windows. I don't like structure. I don't like saying, oh, let's structure a nap at 10, a nap at noon, a nap at 3. I really like to look at wake windows with people. So I find that some of the challenges that people struggle with are, 1, the baby's overtired, 2, not knowing what cues are and just thinking that a baby yawning is the only thing that means that they're tired. Babies yawn all the time. We yawn all the time. Doesn't mean we're tired. A lot of the time what I would suggest looking at is actually the pattern of behavior. So we want to see the baby would start to get a little agitated usually before they're ready, but then they go into this place of being really calm, and it's almost like they sort of go glassy-eyed, and you think, oh, they're fine, oh, look, they're not fussy, they're okay, but they're actually totally spaced out, and now you're approaching missing the window. One cue that I love to share with parents that they don't think about or don't realize, but they often actually notice it, and when I say it to them, they're like, oh my God, yeah, I notice that all the time, is redness of the eyes. So in the waterline, the eye gets a little bit red, and in the eyebrow line, it gets a bit discolored, and so their pigment changes quite a bit. At that point, like, get to bed.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's really, so should they be getting it when they see those cues, or when they're glassy-eyed, or is the glassy-eyed still, we're already passing the...
Your glassy-eyed is a good cue. So it's like looking at that going, okay, and then after that, you usually start to get more fussiness. Or as the baby gets older, hyperactivity. So now they look like, oh, they've got all this energy, when really now they're overtired because that window has passed, and hyper energy is an overtired sign. So you want to be kind of on your way and paying attention to this. And again, looking at the wake window. So looking age appropriately at what wake windows are and what your baby is doing. And I think another big not mistake, but something I see as a challenge for parents is they get so fixated on a schedule, and it's too rigid that they stop the intuitive experience with their child, and they're just so fixated on what did that article say. And I haven't found an article that works, or a book that works for every baby.
Yeah.
None.
So as far as scheduling, like even scheduling like nighttime stuff, when do you think that's an age appropriate thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great question. I say to clients, like, we do building healthy habits from an early age. I don't think that you need to sleep train. I think that you need to like build age appropriate habits from day one is really a great plan. What you start to see is between 6 to 8 weeks, your baby is needing a bedtime. You're seeing this kind of funny witching hour later on in the day, and you get this, it's almost like 3 hours where it's really hard to put them down. It's like they're fussy, they're this, they're that. It's just not an easy transition for them. And what'll happen is you'll have a really long evening nap, and people go, oh, they're having this great 3 hour nap. Well, actually that's them showing you that combination, that it's a bedtime. So I think that making sure that you've got an awareness around 6 to 8 weeks going, I think they're probably going to need to go to bed a little earlier than that 9, 10, 11 o'clock, and maybe closer to 8, and creating a routine around that. But still, the nighttime is going to be a time where you want to structure feeds, but not over structure. So it's like, every 3 hours or so should be about enough. Still feeding in the night. I think that a lot of babies still feed in the night till quite late into their life, to be quite honest.
Now, if you had the ideal habits at nighttime from starting from people that are currently pregnant and moving on.
Yes.
What are some like really good habits to start? Let's just say 0 to 6 months.
Yeah.
Day 1 to 6 months. 0
to 6 months, and we're actually doing a workshop on this next month. Is a 0 to 6 month workshop. I think it's really great to start building healthy habits in terms of helping your baby get to sleep a little bit more independently. So not without your help, but falling asleep and waking up in the same place. So when you think about the 4-month regression, so to speak, everyone goes, oh my God, it's so scary. Everything goes out the window. It's just that your baby's starting to understand cause and effect. So that thing you used to do before that worked so well is not going to work anymore and not be so effective. So holding, rocking, nursing to sleep, there's a time and a place for that, absolutely, but also teaching your baby. And I'm a big believer in sleep teaching, not sleep training. I think that we want to teach and be able to do little, things along the way so that we're keeping going in the right direction. So I would say doing things like, I have a video on my Facebook group page called The Wiggle Down, and it's a technique that I do where it's essentially transferring your baby better. So that's a really good starting place to transfer your baby down better, but help them adjust and fall asleep in the space that we want them to sleep in. So whether that's a bassinet, crib, wherever it is that you want them to sleep, but being able to put them down and soothe them and comfort them and help them in the sleep space, I think that that's one of the number one things that you could start working on to help your baby go, oh, okay, I also know how to do this. I don't need to be rocked, bounced, nursed.
And so what about those things? What about rocking, bouncing, nursing, shushing, and the rest of that stuff? Like, are those okay? Are they detrimental? Do they create bad habits? Like, what do you find with all those? You know
what? I think there's a time and a place for everything, and there's a time and a place to rock your baby to sleep, to hold your baby to sleep. And I also think that you need to I always say, have flexibility and have the ability do both. So if you have, for example, a toddler and a new baby, well, you're going to have to be on the go sometimes. You can't just be at home practicing naps and sleep all day. So I find people get really stressed out about that, and a lot of consultants will say, no, you have to stay at home and practice all your naps. I don't say that. I feel like realistically, you've got to be able to be flexible. So go have your baby start practicing naps in the stroller. Have your baby practice naps in the carrier. I think it's wonderful. But also have them be able to do the other, like have all those things work well for you.
So being diverse. So it's not just baby only naps in a stroller, baby only naps in the ergo.
Right.
Because that might pattern them to only be in that position all the time. So being more adaptable with them.
I have clients who, really extreme where they can only be in an ergo, and they literally have to take shift work at night with the parent walking them all night long in an ergo, and that's not sustainable. Yeah.
But actually, let me ask you a question about that though. Is that still better than a child not getting enough sleep?
Yeah.
Okay.
It is. And so I think it's so important that they get the sleep. I always say I care more that you get the sleep than how the sleep happens.
And we talk about the same. We have parents that are coming in with big sleep challenges. The kids are only sleeping 10 or 11 hours a day.
Yes.
We usually start them off with, well, let's just get them to sleep however, whether it's shushing, rocking, bouncing, water playing, white noise, in a car, or whatever it takes, as long as they get the quantity of sleep up.
Yes.
And then as we move along, we'll start breaking those bad habits. And it's better to see a healthy kid that has enough sleep than one that just has no sleep but good habits.
Yes, absolutely. Yep.
Okay. A lot of people talk about the crying out method. I'd love to. I'll just be frank. I don't think it's a good thing to do. I think it creates anxiety in children. I think it creates fear in children.
Yep.
I'm not a fan of that.
Yep.
I wanted to know I'm pretty sure I know what your viewpoints are, but I wanted to see what are your viewpoints. What is your idea? Why do you see that as being a detriment, or do you see it being good?
I don't think it's good.
Okay.
I never practice it. I think, and honestly, depending on when you talk to me about this, I could get very heated about it and be really fired up, because what I practice and what I do is so unique to sleep consulting because my approach is hands-on, parent-present. And because of my background in neuroscience, I've been able to actually develop strategies myself that aren't practiced anywhere else. So I see that there is a change that needs to be made and can be made, and there's not a one-dimensional way to look at sleep training. And I think that it's a very frustrating conversation because everyone thinks in some capacity that they need to let their baby cry it out, and everyone's idea of what that is very different. So I think that defining what cry it out means is also the number one thing you need to do, because people think crying it out means your baby's crying while they're trying to fall asleep. Babies are going to cry. It's what you're doing and how you're supporting them in that space that's going to make it a cry it out versus an attachment-based philosophy where you're supporting your child and teaching them versus training them. Crying out is shutting the door and not coming back. Like, that's extinction and an extinction cry out. So essentially it's like shut the door at 7 p.m., come back at 7 a.m. Don't go in between.
Yeah. Scary,
if you ask me. And as the baby gets older and more emotionally developed, the more it is actually... it can be detrimental to them long term, right? Controlled crying is something I also don't do. It's where you check in on them every few minutes, pat, 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 leave for 5-10 minutes, and it's kind of like a longer thing. I don't do that again. I think that that's very one-dimensional. It works for some babies, and if someone's comfortable with it, so be it. Like, I'm not saying that you shouldn't do it because I said so, but if you're asking me my opinion, I think that there's so many more options, and there's a lot more healthy there's so much more healthy intervention that you can do and still get the same results. The other thing with cried out is it's so one-dimensional that you can't come back and do it again. You know what I mean? If your kid gets sick or you travel or you do this or that, there is an inability to revisit that because your child's going to cry even more, because guess what? When they're sick, you need to help them, and you need to be able to have strategies around doing that, right?
Okay.
So, yeah.
I think you've already answered the question, but we get a lot of moms asking us all the time is, if they sleep in the car seat, is that a bad thing? Does that affect their home sleeping? Does it affect the home napping? Are you saying that nighttime is the greatest to be in the same place that we want them to sleep for the rest of their life, whether it be a bedroom, bassinet, crib, and daytime varying it is actually an okay thing?
Exactly. Yeah. A lot of the time people say to me, oh, I heard that they don't get restorative sleep. It's like, well, what's better? Restorative sleep that's perfect, or sleep. So it's like, sure, I would actually beg to differ in some cases. I think that sleeping in a car seat for hours and hours at a time, and I'm sure you could speak to that, is not healthy for their body. Yeah. Physically, because the car seat's not meant to be in for more than an hour at a time. But I think that sleeping in a stroller, sleeping in a carrier, if this is going to get your baby to sleep and allow you flexibility and sanity and make you feel like you can get through the day and have your baby feeling good, then flexibility is everything. I think they should be able to do both.
You mentioned a term earlier, like a 4-month regression, and that word regression kind of agitates me a little bit, because regression will be moving backwards, right? And I see that there's certain levels of neural development that sleep just changes naturally at, where they start to grow and they learn how to flip or crawl or walk, change solids, foods, and there's going to be certain periods of time where it's not. I really disdain the word regression, because that would mean that they move backwards, but it's that. Sleep is going to continue to move forwards in healthy kids. That means change. Yeah. And is that the same thing that you see, that they're going to change their sleep habits, their sleep times, their sleep amounts as they progress to different nerve development? And it's those 4-month marks or the 2-year, whatever those marks might be. Right. Because those are also neurodevelopmental marks.
Totally. I think that it's really important to see, and I always call them progressions, it's very important to see what's going on for them developmentally and where they're at. And if you look at it as like, oh, this terrible thing's happening and everything's gone backwards, well, no, it's just those things that they know, the fundamentals that they know about sleep, they understand cause and effect. So, for example, at 4 months, if you're holding a baby and nursing them to sleep and you're transferring them and putting them down, they're going to start to wake up. And if you think about it yourself, it's like, hey, I fell asleep with my mom, maybe nursing, doing something else, and I woke up by myself in a crib. That's cause for, hey, excuse me, come get me. I don't know how to do this by myself because I need my process again. So it's really more of an awareness, and a baby being, having a higher intelligence, and its cognitive development, physical development, emotional development, all of those things come into play when you're looking at what's going on for these regressions.
So if you're seeing kids that aren't sleeping well over a period of time, are there certain things that you start to see developmentally that they start to delay on or miss on? And and is there a consistency to when do you start to see those things happen?
That they're missing, or?
Missing, slow, affected?
I think that the 4-month and the 8-month are pretty tough because there's so much development going on. I find that those are the 2 biggest physical development milestones for them young. It's kind of like the 4-month, the 8-month, and then somewhere between 15 and 18 months again, because you think about what's going on physically while they've just started learning to roll. They're just like, wow, I can understand my world. The cognitive development and the physical development together are what I find the largest monumental ones, where sleep can be, challenging. And I always say to people, I just did a post about this on my Instagram, like activity, like up your physical activity, because you need to get them tired, but you need to get them tired in the right way. And a lot of times people don't realize what that means. And taking them to the same old place, or say, you live in a space where you're home a lot, or you have a big space where being home's easy, it's boring. It's really boring for them. It's mundane. It's the same old, and they're not stimulated by it. So if you are going to be at home, start to integrate new things into that, new sensory activity. Like I always talk about sensory play. Sensory play is water, is different environmental changes, dancing with them and tipping them, things that they don't usually do. It's a different sensory experience for them. It makes their brain tired, right? It's not overstimulation of toys and stuff.
Yeah. That's great. We work together all the time, and you refer people to us all the time, which we are wonderful. What are some of the things that you see when you're working good sleep habits with your clients that you're like, they got to get chiropractic care?
Right. Immediately, the first time I touch a baby, I can tell what's going on. Like I pick them up, and immediately, the first thing I look for is this baby stiff? A baby who's arching and is stiff, I can tell they're uncomfortable. And they usually have a different pitch in their cry, and the parent is usually like they're inconsolable. Every time I put them down, they freak out, and it's a different kind of freak out where you can tell it's a pain cry versus I'm just tired.
Yeah.
You know, for me, it's always the physical. Do you have a stiff baby? Is your baby too rigid? You know, you've said to me, like, a baby shouldn't come out of the womb with a nice, strong neck,
yeah.
you know? So all of those things, like, I want the baby to slouch and lump into me. And then, I mean, I just feel like everybody should come see somebody. Like, I have chiropractic care. I've always found that it's just one of those things that it's part of health. Like, it's something to just keep you. Why wouldn't you come? Because let's just make sure it's not an issue, you know? And if it's not, great. Like I think you've said before, like, we love to see babies where we're like, you know what, you're good, see you later. But oftentimes it's like, if you think about, and too, I always ask people about their pregnancy and their birth. Okay, we had forceps, we had vacuum, we had emergency C-section, all of those things. You know, if you haven't birthed naturally, your baby's not getting the squishing that they like. I now think about all of that stuff because it affects them in one way, shape, or form, and it might be affecting their nervous system, which is then affecting their sleep.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And so, you know, we've talked about that before. There's a difference, I tell all parents, the difference between kids that cry, because all babies cry.
Yeah.
All babies cry.
Every one of them.
And there's going to be some babies that just have, especially when they're young, a couple nights a month, maybe they're just crap.
Yeah.
You just can't, and that's different than a baby that's arching, screaming, crying.
Totally.
Turning purple, turning blue,
Totally.
like arms and legs stiff. And there's a real big difference between a baby that's crying and something else that's occurring. And sometimes the babies that cry, it's not a normal thing, and they start crying usually because they're going through stages of development and growth.
Yeah.
And the next day it's like, oh, well, now we see that they were constipated, or now we see that they ate some solid foods, or now we see that they're using their hand-eye coordination. Or sometimes we'll see that stuff because sometimes growth can be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And there's a difference between babies being uncomfortable and babies actually being in pain or dysfunctional or having trouble.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So when do you go? So, you know, there's that idea of 10 or 12 hours at night.
Yeah.
2 big naps.
Right.
Yeah. We've talked about 45 minutes is the bare minimum to call something a nap.
Totally.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then, so if the ideal or something we're looking for is 10 or 12 hours at night, 2 naps in the daytime, when is that transition point to 1 nap, and when is that transition point to maybe no naps? I know it's different for every child.
Very much so.
Yeah. But as kind of loose rules and guidelines, what are we talking age appropriate wise?
So again, this will vary greatly. You read articles and it will say, oh, it's got to be this or this. I find, you know, through day-to-day practice, what I see with my clients is, on average, most babies will drop to 2 naps somewhere between 7 to 9 months. And then
drop to 1 nap, you mean?
2.
2 naps.
2, yeah.
So you're thinking 3 naps in the daytime?
Before that,
okay.
Yeah, so at 4 months, they drop to about 3. They go from like 4 to 3.
Yep.
At 7 to 9 months, they drop from 3 to 2. Yep. And these are all transitions. It isn't like, oh, and now we're on, 2. And then to 1 would be anytime as early as around a year. So a lot of daycares often will say we need them at 1 nap at a year. So it can happen. Some babies, that's way too early. Like some babies, I have kids who drop down at 11 months. I have kids who drop at 18 months. So it really ranges in terms of the child's needs and who they are. But I'd say on average, what we're looking at is somewhere between 13 to 16 months for 1 nap. And then hopefully they're still napping at least till 2.5 years old, 3.
Okay.
I'd say, some kids love their sleep and they'll still keep napping all the way up to almost 4 years old. And it can then affect their night because they're having too much daytime sleep. But I would say somewhere to drop to no naps is really common, is around 3.
Okay.
Yeah.
And for school-age kids, say kindergarten kids,
yep.
What do you think, and because there's a lot of debate about, what do you think is a good sleep time for, say, a 3-year-old or a 4 or 5-year-old or a 6-year-old? Like, what do you think are good sleep times for them to go to bed? Because it seems like in our society, it's getting later and later.
Totally.
And when moms are like, oh no, there's a 6:30 or a 7:30 sleep time, people gasp. They're like, well, that sounds ridiculous.
Yeah.
But it seems like as a culture, it's being pushed too far.
Right. And this is where, again, you'll see kids who are suffering from overtiredness and has a long-term effect on them. And it can lead to obesity, diabetes, like all kinds of things if they're going to bed too late and not getting enough sleep in the night. I really like, the latest to 7:30 bedtime. Like, I think that somewhere between 6:30 and 7:30 is their natural time. It's when the body naturally releases melatonin for younger children. And then you often see the hyperactivity where then you get tricked into thinking, oh, no, they're fine, because you see that cortisol spike because that has now changed into something else. They're overtired. So somewhere between 6:30 and 7:30 is my ideal. Sometimes families have to have a later bedtime because, say, a parent doesn't get home until 6:30. So I would say latest would be 8.
Okay.
Yeah.
Past 8, what's an appropriate age? 8, 9 years old?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, like 8.
Yeah.
8 or 9. It would be like 8 years old would be like 8:15, something like that. Yeah.
So when do you, as you're starting to move kids to older ages, when do you think that kids start sleeping more towards an adult schedule of like 8 hours?
Oh gosh. 9 hours? Well, that's why I don't specialize in that.
Yeah, it's a different, okay.
It's so crazy.
That's a fine answer.
I mean, I think it's probably over the age of like 12. Like, that's what I would say is quite common, but it gets so complicated with other things that I usually specialize up to 6 years old.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So, I was going to ask you a question to 8 years old, but
say
from 3 to 6, say someone that's aged 3 to 6 or 3 to 8, we're still looking for 12 hours of sleep at night. Is that nice?
Yeah, that'd be ideal. Yeah. So, I mean, like I said earlier, like anything under like 10 and a half is not good. Like, we just don't want to see that unless they're having some other, like I have some clients that they have a 10 and a half hour night, but a 3.5 hour nap. So it's like their baby does things differently and it just works for them.
Yeah.
But that's unusual.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, when kids are getting proper sleep and they've got good habits, do you see them potty training easier, less tantrums, better with solid foods, better with diet, better with communication, better with walking, talking? Do you see these? It's a loaded question.
I mean, yes and no. I think that a lot of the times what you'll see the biggest switch with is their emotional state.
Okay.
So children who have, really great sleep are typically a little more balanced. Now, that doesn't mean that your toddler's not going to tantrum and freak out. Like, toddlers lose it, That's what happens. Especially when they're really just learning how to talk. There's a lot of frustration involved in that age. That's why I say, like, the 15-month mark is tough. But I think overall, like, we know sleep is just the foundation for everything we do. It's the number one most important thing next to, like, drinking water and eating food that we do. So I would say that, yes, it has to be. It has to have an effect on everything else. Yeah.
Great. So we're you can always add comments as you need as we're progressing along. Any questions if you have any, and we'll be constantly answering them, and we'll keep this posted up on our page. And you said you're having a sleep workshop coming up?
I am.
Can you let us know a little bit about that?
Yeah, so the workshop, I usually do workshops every 6 to 8 weeks at the Juice Truck in Vancouver. Their storefront location. There's a community space. And it's going to be on my website. We'll link it below. It's 0 to 6 months, and it's just the art and science of sleep. So we're going to be talking about everything. I'll be giving you demos, and then there'll be a couple little takeaways to take home with you. But it's just kind of learning really specifically, like, what to expect, how to be hands-on with your child, and do the things that I talk about a lot, which is that more attachment-based philosophy and like the why behind everything. And then we're also doing a 6 to 12 months. So both of those workshops are going to be the same day, which is April 14th, and they're each an hour and a half. So tickets are for sale on the website, and there's only 10 spots limited. So It does fill up pretty quick.
And the attached parenting, a lot of parents have this concept that you can love your child too much, and that's not true.
Right.
There is no way possible to touch, hug, love,
no,
and be kind to your child. And Desiree's philosophies and trainings and such on habits are of that same nature. Of the more you provide love, kindness, support to your children, the better they're going to sleep.
Totally.
Yeah. The better they're going to be
100%.
developmentally, the better their moods and behaviors, and the easier it's going to be to be a parent, and I would also say the most enjoyable it is.
Well, you feel good about what you're doing. Like I just think that most of my clients say, like, you know what? It was hard because teaching them is hard, and you know it's always going to be hard no matter what you do. Like, you have a child, you know, like you didn't birth a robot. Like you had a baby who has their own, you know, personality and everything. But I think that being able to teach them, like I get so frustrated with this idea of training. It's like, why aren't we teaching them? We teach them everything else, but we're going to train them how to do this thing that is so fundamentally important. But we're going to treat them like it's, you know, it's like a drill sergeant. So that's why I say, like, we got to teach sleep, you know, and it's something that takes time, and they aren't robots. It's going to take time. It's going to take a lot of practice.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for coming on.
You're welcome.
And we look forward to answering any questions you might have.
Yes. See you later.